Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went in there? Or struggled to find the right word when you're mid-sentence? Most of us simply put that down to being tired or maybe stressed. But where exactly is the line between normal absent-mindedness and that first serious warning sign? Today we need to talk about dementia. And what if I told you that the single biggest misconception about dementia is believing it's nothing more than simple poor memory? That very mistake prevents thousands of people from spotting the real symptoms early enough. In this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know about dementia in plain English, what it actually is, the crucial early symptoms that people often miss, and most importantly, what each of us can do right now to protect our brain health. Stay with us. This is going to be incredibly informative. Let's start with the most essential question. What exactly is dementia? Many people assume it's a specific illness like the flu or diabetes, but that is simply not the case. Dementia is not actually a disease, it is a syndrome. That means it's a blanket term used to describe a whole group of symptoms caused by damage to the brain. Imagine your brain as an incredibly complex and powerful computer. Dementia isn't just a glitch in one program. It's a systemic failure that gradually affects the hard drive and the operating memory, and even the processor. As a result, a person loses not only their memories, but also their ability to think clearly, reason, orient themselves spatially, and even control their emotions. Now, the most common cause of this system failure is Alzheimer's disease, but it is certainly not the only one. Understanding this crucial distinction is the first step toward properly addressing the issue. So the first thing we need to establish, right off the bat, is this. Dementia is absolutely not a normal part of aging. Yes, as we get older, we all slow down a little bit. It becomes harder to absorb new information. And sure, we might forget the name of that actor in an old black and white movie. That is perfectly normal. The key distinction here is that during normal aging, these changes do not interfere with our ability to live a full, independent life. We can still manage our finances, prepare meals, and maintain our social connections. Dementia, on the other hand, is a pathological process. It's a disease. The forgetfulness becomes so severe that it actively starts to dismantle daily life and routines. Someone might completely forget how to use a basic telephone, or they may become utterly lost in their own familiar neighborhood. This is a crucial qualitative difference. Imagine two paths. One is a smooth, gentle slope downward that represents normal aging. The other path, however, is a sudden, sheer drop. That sheer drop is what dementia is. Fundamentally, dementia all boils down to a tragic process, the gradual death of our brain cells, which we call neurons. These tiny cells govern everything we do, our thoughts, our memories, our movements, and even our emotions. They talk to each other using electrical and chemical signals, forming an incredibly complex internal network. With dementia, this crucial network begins to break down. The vital connections between neurons are severed, and eventually the cells themselves die. And tragically, this process is irreversible. To try and picture this, imagine the brain as a bustling, well-populated city. Dementia is then like a mysterious epidemic, causing entire districts to empty out and the roads and infrastructure connecting them to fall into disrepair. Consequently, this city loses its core functions, and the resident, the person themselves, gradually loses their abilities. Since different types of dementia primarily attack different districts or areas of the brain, this is what accounts for the wide variation in symptoms we see. It's important to understand that dementia is an umbrella term. Under this umbrella, we find well over 100 different conditions. The best known and most common of these is Alzheimer's disease. This single condition accounts for 60 to 80% of all diagnoses. With Alzheimer's, abnormal proteins, specifically beta amyloid and tau, accumulate in the brain. These proteins form plaques and tangles that are toxic to our neurons. They effectively choke off the brain cells, preventing them from working, and ultimately killing them. But other forms of dementia exist as well. For example, vascular dementia is the second most common type. This arises due to problems with blood supply to the brain, often following a major stroke or a series of mini-strokes. Think of it this way: if our brain city is suddenly cut off from its oxygen and nutrient supply, certain areas effectively starve and begin to die off. On top of Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, which we hear about often, there are other, less common forms. Take, for instance, Lewy body dementia. This condition involves abnormal protein deposits, what they call Lewy bodies, building up inside the brain cells. This type often comes with symptoms that look a bit like Parkinson's, things like tremors and stiffness in movement. But it's also known for very vivid visual hallucinations. Someone might see people or animals that simply aren't there. Then there's another type, frontotemporal dementia. This attacks the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, the areas responsible for our personality, behaviour, and speech. Because of this, the first symptoms often aren't memory loss. Instead, you see sudden, dramatic changes in personality. A person might become rude, impulsive, or the complete opposite, very apathetic and withdrawn. Understanding exactly which type of dementia someone has is incredibly important for doctors, because the treatment plan and the type of care needed depend entirely on that diagnosis. Now let's turn our attention to the really important bit, those early warning signs we often tend to brush aside. The first, and perhaps most obvious of these, is memory loss. But there is a critically important distinction we need to make here. Forgetting where you put your spectacles or your keys, and then finding them later, that's perfectly normal. But forgetting recent important conversations, constantly repeating yourself, or failing to recall entire recent events, that's a serious red flag. A breakdown specifically in short-term memory is often the most telling sign. Someone might remember their childhood in vivid detail, yet have absolutely no recollection of what they had for breakfast or what they were told just 5 minutes ago. This happens because the areas of the brain responsible for forming new memories, structures like the hippocampus, are often the first to be damaged. It's rather like your computer suddenly failing to save new documents, even though all the older files are still safely stored on the hard drive. The second early sign, which many people tend to overlook, is trouble with planning and solving everyday problems. Things that used to seem straightforward suddenly feel like massive hurdles. For instance, someone might struggle to follow a familiar recipe because they get the sequence of steps muddled up. Or they might find themselves unable to work out the household bills, even though they've handled them for decades. Making a simple shopping list or planning out the day becomes genuinely difficult. Now, this isn't just about being lazy or feeling a bit tired. It's actually a sign that the brain's executive functions are struggling. Think of this as your internal manager, the part that handles organization, concentration, and juggling multiple tasks. When this manager starts to fail, even the most basic chores turn into a complicated mission, often leaving the person confused and highly frustrated. The third major warning sign is difficulty performing routine, everyday tasks. We're talking about those simple activities we usually do on autopilot, without even thinking about them. A person dealing with early-stage dementia might suddenly forget the rules of a beloved card game, one they've been playing for decades. Alternatively, they may get completely disoriented on the routine walk to the local shop, a journey they make daily. A lady might forget how to operate the washing machine, or a gentleman might suddenly find he can't tie his own necktie. This happens because dementia specifically impairs what experts call procedural memory, the memory responsible for skills and actions. The brain, effectively, loses the instruction manual for even the most basic, familiar things. For the individual, this is a truly frightening experience. They begin to feel terribly insecure and incompetent, even when they are safe within their own familiar home. The fourth key indicator is disorientation in time and space. Now, this is much more serious than simply forgetting what day of the week it is. Individuals who are starting to develop dementia might completely lose track of time, confusing the seasons, or even the year. They might wake up in the middle of the night and start getting ready for the day, genuinely believing it is morning and time to go to work. Or perhaps, even more frighteningly, they may forget where they are or how they arrived, even when they are standing inside their own home or flat. Spatial disorientation also manifests when a person struggles to navigate even the most familiar locations. They could find themselves getting utterly lost right on their own street or in their local neighbourhood. This happens because of damage to the parts of the brain that are responsible for maintaining our internal map and our inherent sense of time. For the affected person, the world quickly becomes a confusing and unpredictable place, which naturally causes great distress and anxiety. The fifth less obvious symptom is difficulty with vision and judging space. Now, this isn't simply about eyesight getting worse and needing new spectacles. It's about how the brain interprets what the eyes are actually seeing. A person might find it tricky to read because the lines seem to jump around. They'll struggle to judge distances, which can lead to little mishaps like pouring water right past the glass. They may also have trouble distinguishing colours or recognising the faces of people they know well. Occasionally, they might not even recognise their own reflection in the mirror. This isn't an eye problem at all. It's a problem with the brain's processor, the part that handles all that visual information. Imagine that the camera lens on your smartphone is perfectly fine, but the software that processes the picture has broken down and gives you a distorted image. That is, roughly speaking, what's going on inside the head of someone with dementia. The sixth early warning sign relates specifically to speech and communication. The individual finds it increasingly difficult to hold a simple conversation. They might stop abruptly mid-sentence, completely losing track of what they were trying to say. They often struggle to find the right words too. Instead of saying watch, for instance, they might refer to it as that thing on your arm that tells the time. Their vocabulary shrinks and their speech becomes noticeably broken or disjointed. They may repeat the same stories or questions constantly, seemingly unaware that they have already covered the topic. Consequently, interacting and communicating with others can become a real ordeal for them. They start avoiding social situations and withdraw, which sadly only makes the problem worse. This difficulty arises because dementia specifically targets the brain's language centres, gradually eroding our ability to clearly express our thoughts and understand those around us. And finally, the seventh sign, and this is perhaps the most painful one for families to witness, is profound changes in personality and mood. The person you have known your whole life suddenly seems like a completely different person. That social, cheerful nature might vanish, leaving them withdrawn and apathetic. Someone calm and considered might become suspicious, highly anxious, or even aggressive. They may suffer rapid, dramatic mood swings without any obvious trigger. One minute they're laughing, and the next they're in floods of tears. They might also lose all interest in beloved hobbies and become completely indifferent to things they used to cherish. These changes are caused by damage to the frontal lobes of the brain, the crucial area that controls our emotions and social behaviour. It is very common for loved ones to feel that the person is doing this deliberately or being malicious. But they are truly unable to control their own actions. It is the illness speaking, not them. Right, let's move on to the causes and risk factors involved. The biggest and perhaps most unavoidable risk factor is simply age. The older we get, the higher the likelihood of developing dementia. Once we pass the age of 65, the risk roughly doubles every 5 years. But it is absolutely vital to remember this. Dementia is not synonymous with old age. The vast majority of older people do not suffer from dementia. Age merely increases the probability. It is not a direct cause in itself. The second factor we can't change is genetics. If you have close relatives who have suffered from Alzheimer's, your personal risk is slightly increased. There are specific genes, such as the APOE4 gene, that are linked to a slightly elevated risk profile. However, even if you carry a so-called bad gene, it certainly doesn't guarantee that you will develop the illness. It is simply one element among many in the complex equation of brain health. The good news is There are plenty of risk factors we can, and indeed ought to be, taking control of. And this is where that golden rule really applies. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. The brain, you see, is incredibly demanding. It's an absolute powerhouse. Despite only accounting for about 2% of our total body weight, it hoovers up around 20% of all the oxygen and calories we consume. For it to work properly, it needs an excellent, steady blood supply. That means any issues with your cardiovascular system directly impact the brain. High blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, diabetes, and obesity, these conditions all contribute to damaging our blood vessels, including the crucial ones that feed the brain. Ultimately, this not only increases the risk of developing vascular dementia, but also raises the likelihood of Alzheimer's disease itself. The next set of controllable risk factors revolves around our lifestyle. Smoking, for instance, is one of the brain's biggest enemies. It constricts blood vessels, raises blood pressure, and floods the blood with toxins. Excessive alcohol consumption is also highly toxic to our neurons and can potentially lead to a specific type of dementia. Poor diet, especially one rich in sugar, saturated fats, and processed foods, fuels inflammation and oxidative stress throughout the entire body, including the brain. On the flip side, healthy sleep is the crucial time when our brain literally cleans house, clearing out toxic waste products. This includes beta amyloid, the very protein that builds up in Alzheimer's disease. Chronic lack of sleep severely hinders this essential cleanup process and significantly increases our risks. Another absolutely crucial factor we need to talk about is head injuries. Every significant knock to the head, particularly those where you lose consciousness, leaves its mark and dramatically increases the risk of developing dementia further down the line. This is why safety precautions are so vital. Always buckle up in the car, wear a proper helmet if you're cycling or using skates, and be extra careful to prevent falls, especially as we get on a bit. Now, moving on to another area. Research also clearly demonstrates a link between hearing loss and the risk of dementia. When you struggle to hear, your brain has to dedicate far more energy to simply trying to decipher the sounds, leaving fewer resources available for other important cognitive tasks. Furthermore, hearing difficulties often lead to social isolation, and that, in itself, is recognized as a separate, significant risk factor. Right then, let's talk about the really interesting part, cognitive reserve. Imagine your brain is a muscle. The harder you work it, the stronger and more resilient it becomes. Cognitive reserve is essentially your brain's backup capacity, the vital strength you build up throughout your life. This reserve helps the brain hold up against age-related damage and decline for a much longer period. Even if processes leading to dementia start to develop, a strong brain with a good reserve can compensate for that damage by finding clever detours or alternative pathways for signals to travel. A person with high cognitive reserve can often go longer without showing symptoms of dementia than someone with low reserve, even if the underlying brain damage is exactly the same. It truly is our brain's main line of defense. So how exactly do we build up this cognitive reserve? The answer is simple, really. Keep learning throughout your life. Any challenging mental activity helps forge new brain pathways and keeps the existing ones sharp. Things like learning a foreign language, playing a musical instrument, tackling tricky puzzles, reading complex books, or picking up a brand new hobby, they all make a real difference. The key is to make sure the task is fresh and actually requires some real effort. Just doing the same easy crossword every single day eventually stops being a proper workout for your brain. Your brain needs new challenges. Think of it like going to the gym. If you want your muscles to grow, you have to gradually increase the weight. It's exactly the same principle for your mind. And remember, it is absolutely never too late to start learning something new. Just as crucial is keeping socially active. We humans are naturally social beings. Talking to others is actually one of the most complex things our brain does. It's a massive workout. Think about it. We have to listen carefully, process what's said, analyze body language, formulate our own thoughts clearly, and keep track of the whole conversation. All of that combined is truly powerful brain training. Loneliness and social isolation, on the other hand, are serious risk factors for developing dementia. That's why it's vital to stay connected with friends and family, get involved in community life, join clubs, or just be an active member of your local area. Real, face-to-face interaction stimulates the brain in ways no screen, gadget, or television ever could. It truly is the genuine elixir of youth for the mind. Now let's focus on physical activity. This is arguably the single most powerful and well-proven way to keep the risk of dementia at bay. When we move, our heart pumps more oxygen-rich blood straight up to the brain. Crucially, physical exercise encourages the production of special chemicals, known as growth factors, which help your existing neurons survive and even stimulate the creation of new ones, particularly in the areas responsible for memory. Regular activity also helps you keep your weight, blood pressure, and blood sugar levels in check, which means you're tackling all those other key risk factors too. You certainly don't need to train for the Olympics. All you really need is 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity every week. That could be a brisk walk, swimming, dancing, or perhaps cycling. The most important thing, above all, is sticking with it. And then, of course, there's what we eat, our diet. Now, there's no single magic bullet diet to ward off dementia, but research clearly shows that certain ways of eating can significantly lower your risk. The one that's been studied most often and proven most effective is the Mediterranean diet. Its foundation is built on fresh vegetables, fruit, whole grains, beans, nuts, and of course, plenty of olive oil. You should aim for fish and seafood a couple of times a week, whilst red meat and sugary treats should only be eaten rarely. This eating pattern is packed with powerful antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, which act like a shield, protecting your brain cells from damage. Omega-3 fatty acids found in oily fish are also mighty important, as are your B vitamins. The beautiful thing is, this isn't really a strict diet at all. It's just a healthy way of life that benefits your whole body, not just your mind. Right then, let's wrap up what we've discussed. It's crucial to remember that dementia isn't just a bit of forgetfulness, and it certainly isn't a normal part of getting older. It's a very serious syndrome, caused by the death of brain cells, and tragically, it strips a person of who they really are. We learned that besides the obvious memory loss, there are at least 6 other early warning signs we absolutely mustn't ignore. Difficulties with planning ahead, struggling with familiar daily tasks, disorientation, changes in visual perception, trouble with speech, and noticeable shifts in behaviour. The most important discovery we made is this: roughly 40% of dementia cases can potentially be prevented or delayed. We have powerful tools right at our disposal: physical exercise, a healthy diet, continuous mental stimulation, and an active social life. Looking after your brain is a marathon, not a sprint, and the sooner you start, the better. Thank you so much for watching this important video all the way through. If you found it helpful, please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future health episodes. Now, we have a question for you. Have you or your loved ones experienced those first signs of forgetfulness? How do you personally distinguish between general tiredness and something potentially more serious? Please share your experiences in the comments. It's genuinely helpful for our community. Take good care of yourselves and your minds.